Hi, everyone. I'm Richard Knowles, and I would like to welcome you to Module 2 of my course, Building the Natural Organization, Leading and Using the Process Enneagram. Dr. Lowell Christie, director of the Mind Navigation Labs, made some important comments about my work recently. He said Richard's presentation for the Club of Remy on December 9, 2020 provides a beachhead in the post-IT world of human dynamics. His pioneering work points the way to new ways of enhancing productivity through organizational change, patterned after nature's self-organizing through design of human interactions and human communications. You remember in Module 1, I introduced you to the Process Enneagram, discussed the fire and the importance that was to me in shifting my thinking, and talked about the natural processes of self-organization and how work gets done, the doing. We also discussed the nature of problems and the need to use the right tools at the right level, and introduced to you the Process Enneagram and showed it as a blue ocean strategy. Today, in this Module 2, we'll follow this agenda: building the natural organization, talk about managership and leadership, share with you the history of the development of the Process Enneagram, and talk about the Dance and Wholeness. Here's the Process Enneagram figure. When we work with organizations, the process begins with an opening question that's important and compelling to the people in the organization or community. The question is formulated from an appreciative inquiry perspective, like asking how do we enhance the flow of our work order systems, and not a specific question looking at a problem like how do we reduce the delays in the work order system. The question frames and focuses the dialogue for the discussions around the 9 points and is pointing to the future. In using the Process Enneagram, we bring diverse groups of people together from the organization or the community to look at this opening question, which is important and complex one that they share together. This diverse group needs to include a cross-section of people from across the organization or community. We use the Process Enneagram in a structured way to help them tell their story. As they progress around the perimeter of the Enneagram, a picture unfolds. Who and what they are becomes visible. For many people, this is the first time that they've been heard and able to contribute and enrich the picture. In my experience in doing workshops with people, I find that they get usually quite excited when they see all this new picture. It's often much more comprehensive than any one of them had seen before. Often they're quite relieved that others are seeing some of the same things they've seen, but have never been openly talked about before. The story they create opens them up to seeing that they can change their story and create a new and better future. In creating their new story, they see how important it is for them to openly share information together, up and down and across the organization or group, so everyone knows what's going on. They see how important it is to treat each other with mutual respect and courtesy. They find out how important it is to listen, to tell the truth, and to learn together. They find a strong sense of meaning as they see how they, each as individuals, are contributing to helping making them more successful. In creating their new story, they see that they are all in it together and can make it happen. Most groups find this very exciting. When we talk about the inner lines of the Process Enneagram, the people can see, usually for the first time, how and why things are happening as they do. The inner lines are hidden to most people, so when they're revealed, excitement and new possibilities emerge. They can see the natural processes of self-organization and of how work gets done, the doing. Based on my experience around the fire incident that I've talked about earlier, I think that people already know these natural patterns and processes in their subconscious minds. So when they see them in their workshop, they connect quite quickly and feel that this all is making good sense to them. The new story they create is their story, and they're going to make it come true. When they have created their new story, they do not resist it. Coming out of this Process Enneagram workshop, people begin to change. The organization begins to change. What people have learned as they worked on in their opening question begins to spread to other work that they're doing, and the whole culture begins to change. We never go into an organization and tell them that we're going to change their culture. We work on their important, complex problem, and things change. Culture is the outcome of how we agree to work together and live together. When a consultant says they're going to work with an organization to change their culture, they're working at the wrong end of the process. The culture is the outcome of what they choose to do as they work together. This is why so many culture change programs do not work. We work with the people on an important, complex problem using the Process Enneagram, and as a result of the new story they create together, a new culture emerges. This is an important slide which I've shown earlier, but just for review. In the upper part of it, we bring people together to help solve complex problems. In doing this, they build the social connections with other people that they need in order to do the work. And it releases the emotional energy and commitment to get the work done quickly and well. The comment at the bottom of this slide is also quite important. The Process Enneagram is the tool that bridges complex adaptive systems and chaos theories with practical applications. You remember from Module 1 that we're using the Process Enneagram to address complex problems, so we are using the right tool at the right level. Now I want to go deeper into things with you and talk more about building the natural organization. And you remember the context in which all this was developed was at the plant in Bell, West Virginia, where I was the manager. This is not a benign environment. The plant is about a mile long and a third of a mile wide. The Kanawha River is on the right side, and the mountains are on the left. In the little town of Bell, you can see beyond the plant, along the river's edge, nestled next to the mountain. The big white storage tank in the bottom of the picture is 110 feet high and 100 feet in diameter and can hold 40 million pounds of anhydrous ammonia. At the other end of the plant, up near the Bell community, we handled lots of hydrogen cyanide as another raw material. So there was no room for making mistakes. We had to do things carefully, and we had to do them well. And the people learned to do that together with us. We brought in raw materials by barge or tank truck or rail car and shipped raw materials or finished products by rail and tank truck. This next picture shows that there were plenty of opportunities at the plant to have problems. A number of years after I left the Bell plant, the DuPont company spun off part of their business and called it the Chemours Chemical Company, and the Bell plant was spun off in that business. The plant had changed a lot since I was there, and they had actually sold some of the operating buildings to other companies so they could make products themselves in small lots. On December 8th, 2020, one of these other companies was operating one of the buildings, and their process exploded at about 10 o'clock at night. You can see the fire there in the central part of the picture. The rest of the lights are the normal lights that would shine at at night for the plant. The explosion occurred about 10 in the evening. It was violent enough that it blew some of the shrapnel from the equipment as far as a half a mile away. One man was killed and 2 were injured. So this working environment was difficult and required a lot of focus. We had to keep the context in mind as we went forward, but that was the environment in which we were working together. Now let me share with you my journey towards wholeness. When I came into the plant from other DuPont plants where I've been manager, I was a pretty strong top-down manager. I was driving the organization hard, pushing the people to get things done. Trust was low, and there was lots of dysfunctional behaviors going on. That was true in the former plants, and it was true when I first came into the Bell plant. Progress was slow and difficult, and the safety and environmental performance and earnings at the Bell plant when I came in were awful. And I was very unhappy with my own performance, and the path ahead was not clear to me at all. In my first year at Bell, we were slowly making some progress for the first year, and then we had a fire, and I've talked about that fire before and how important that was for me as a transition. When the fire occurred, all the people in the plant instantly changed. They became self-organized into high-performance work teams. They did amazing work together. And we were back into production in just 3 weeks. People worked long overtime hours. They did things they'd never done together before. They made decisions close to the work, and we came back into production quickly. And there were no injuries or incidents, which I was very pleased with as well. But then we reverted back to our old dysfunctional behaviors after we got back into production. We couldn't sustain this high-performance team approach that had developed. So I was asking questions. What happened? Why can't we work as high-performance teams all the time? Our transformation had to begun, and let me go deeper with you about that. More questions came up as we were pondering what happened. Why do people hold back and do as little as possible? What's really going on? In my office, could I really tell what was really going on? I didn't know. How do people and things interact and function together? I didn't know. How can I understand the parts? What about the whole? The interactions, the creation of the whole Bell plant and the whole operation. And why can't we operate as a high-performance team like we did in the fire situation, where everything changed? Why can't we sustain that work? Do we move towards natural systems? And I've begun to study John Bennett and chaos and complexity, as I mentioned in Module 1, while I was at the other plants, but I still hadn't really developed it to the point where I could internalize it. But questions like this came up. Do we need to move towards more natural systems? And how can I see the whole and the parts all at the same time so I can have a good sense of what I'm doing as the manager? So the plant's transformation began to occur. As we did this, everything improved. Our injury rates dropped by 96%, and we did that in the first 3 years, but it sustained that level of world-class performance for 17 years. Total emissions to the environment went down about 95% in 5 years. Productivity went up about 45%, and earnings rose about 300%. So things got a whole lot better as we began to move forward. And we began to realize and discover the natural processes of self-organization and how work gets done and bring those into harmony. I've made lots of observations while I was at the plant and over the last 25 years in my consulting work. The patterns and processes that we see as we work around the world are remarkably consistent. For a top-down organization, we'll get one set of patterns. For an organization in which all the people are engaged and involved, we'll get a different set of patterns. It's amazing to see how consistent they are as we work across the world from one organization to another. We see organizations as complex, adapting, self-organizing networks of people. People want respect. They want to be listened to. They want to feel valued. They want to be talked with. They want to know what's going on and be included. They want to be heard. They know that they're not always right, but they can bring up ideas and we can talk about them. We were sharing almost all information. I was sharing information about the business and safety and whatnot, and they were sharing information about how things were going in the plant. Everybody could talk to everybody. We didn't worry about organizational structure or the stovepipes, and there was lots of feedback. And people were contributing, and we were co-creating our future together. During the course of this, we created order and focus for the business and openness and freedom for the people to learn, to grow, and to make decisions close to their work, all at the same time. We developed a 360-degree view of what was happening. We began to see the whole, all the interactions of the parts. And most of the surface problems disappeared. We discovered that there are two natural processes in organizations that are fundamentally important. And these processes became visible in the fire when the dysfunctional management processes were ripped off and the people began to do things close to the work that made sense and they knew how to do, and they could create their future as they worked together. So one of these processes is self-organization. The other process is how work actually gets done. And when these are brought into harmony, the people in the organization do amazing work together. Nature is full of self-organizing systems. This is a natural process. It shows up in weather, rivers, ecosystems like forests and prairies and marshes and wetlands are self-organizing systems. Ice fields self-organize. Insects like bees and termites self-organize. Animals form herds. They self-organize. Even sand piles self-organize. Earthquakes self-organize. Self-organizing seems to be the way the world works. People self-organize all the time. We see this in community clubs, new businesses, National Organization for Women. You see it at cocktail parties and tea parties. Groups like unions and cliques and gangs, hunting clubs, all self-organize as they form and gather around things that are of interest to them. It's a natural process. Organizations are complex, adapting systems, and they're self-organizing all the time. Let me give you an example of some self-organization that you have probably experienced yourself. Suppose you're at a reception. The new plant manager is going to be coming in. Several hundred people are at the reception, and you're in different groups talking and visiting and moving from one group to another as your interests change. Then the new manager comes in. The room is very loud. The energy level is very, very high in anticipation of what is going to be happening. But then the new manager announces to the group, okay, we're going to make this place better. You're all in the wrong group, so I'm going to have to reorganize this thing around, so we're going to get it right. And here's my organization chart that's showing how this is going to look. What do you suppose happens to the energy in the room when the manager makes this announcement. In my experience, the energy goes through the floor. People shut down. They get quiet. Some go to the bathroom and never come back. This powerful energy of self-organization is very fragile, and simple things that can be done can disturb it and break the harmony that you need in order for this to happen and for the group to become excellent in their performance. So let me talk a little bit about natural processes and how they are taking place. All work seems to follow a prescribed process. This is the natural process of how work takes place. And I want to talk about it with an example we all know, like baking a cake. So the process begins, that baking the cake begins with my decision and my awareness that I'm hungry for cake. My intention then is, at point 1, I'm going to bake a carrot cake because that's the kind of cake I really like. The next thing I have to do is to check the recipe. What are the rules and the guidelines about putting all this stuff together? What am I going to need? These are the principles and standards I'm going to look at point 4. Then I have to check out to be sure that I have all the ingredients. I've got all the pots and pans. That's dealing with the issues and the ambiguities at point 2. I then organize the kitchen so I can actually do the baking and do it well and have everything set in the right order. That's the structure at point 8. And then I actually put things together and bake the cake. That's the work at point 5. And after the cake is baked, I then try a piece and eat it to see if I like it, if the recipe was good or if I have to modify it. That's the learning and potential at 7. All work seems to follow this sequence. This was followed in the fire. This was followed in the work that people did to bring the plant back up into operation. I've seen this pattern over and over. Both the self-organizing pattern and the pattern for how work gets done, I think, are known at an unconscious level by all of us. And when our dysfunctional management behaviors are torn off, like happened in the fire, people spontaneously begin to work this way and can do extraordinary work together. And when these two processes are harmonized, amazing things happen. So I think the key to success is using the natural process of self-organization and harmonizing it with the natural process of how work takes place, the doing, so that the organization can fulfill its vision and mission quickly and effectively. However, these can be disrupted quite easily when management makes statements like I shared in the reception example. The Process Enneagram is a meta-model. That is, it's a model within models and within models. And it brings the natural processes together in a simple yet powerful way. We don't have to force it. We just have to move with it. Using this tool, both dialogue and doing unfold together in a dynamical way. And using the Process Enneagram, we can see the whole, the parts, and the interaction of the parts all at the same time. So here's the Process Enneagram figure again that I've shown earlier. The triangle, 0, 3, 6, or identity, relationship, and information is the self-organizing process. I talk about information, relationship, and identity because that's the way it unfolded for me as I walked the plant. I walked out and shared information, talked with people, learned about what they were doing, did it with respect and courtesy, listened, tried to be authentic, and trust built. And we helped people see how their work fit into the success of the whole. So the way in which I actually did it was this, but this is the self-organizing leadership triangle. The pattern for work is shown by the red arrows. In the baking the cake example, my intention is I want carrot cake. I've got to look at the recipe. What are the principles and standards of doing this kind of work together? Do I have all the ingredients? These are the issues and ambiguities. Is the kitchen set up properly? That's a structural piece that I work on. And then I actually bake the cake and do the work, and then eat a piece. And that process follows the red arrows from 1 to 4 to 2 to 8 to 5, 7, and then back to 1. And now we're on a learning helix, because each time we come back to 1, we start a new cycle with a new insights and better ways to begin doing things, and we continue to learn together as we move forward. Within the Process Enneagram, there are actually 3 leadership processes that are embedded. One is the self-organizing leadership process that I just talked about: information, relationship, and identity. Another leadership process is the operational leadership process: issues, structure, and work. The third leadership process is strategic leadership, with the intention, principles and standards, and learning. Most of the time we want to be in the self-organizing leadership process, but we have to have situational awareness and know when we need to shift. Sometimes an emergency comes up and we move to operational. Here's a problem. We've got to organize ourselves. Let's get the work done, and off we go. Sometimes we have to move to the strategic process when we're bringing in a new tool, for example, like agile manufacturing. That's our new intention. Does it require any new principles and standards of behavior? And what new things do we need to learn? And the leader has to move among these conditions as the situations require. As I said, most of the time the leaders need to be functioning in the self-organizing leader process. However, they've got to have situational awareness. I want to talk some more about this and give you a sense of bringing these together into harmony. The Process Enneagram figure is shown at the top of this slide. Right below it is the self-organizing leadership process. On the left-hand side is the operational leadership process, where issues and ambiguities, structure, and work are connected. On the right-hand side is the strategic leadership process is shown, where intention, principles and standards, and learning and potential are connected. And as I said earlier, the leader has to have the situational awareness to know which of these 3 he or she should be using. Just below that, in the center, is the process for how work actually gets done. That's the 1-4-2-8-5-7 pattern. And as you merge the self-organizing and the process of work patterns, you get coherence at the bottom. All the lines are touching different points. They're not interfering with one another. Things are clean. If we're working in the self-organizing process most of the time and sharing information and helping people see what's going on and learning together, we can occasionally move into the operational or the strategic process without turning things upside down. However, if we get stuck in the operational process, you can begin to see that the work process and the leadership process become incoherent and the pieces don't fit together quite right. And when you're in that process, you're not talking about a lot of the things you need to talk about, like identity, relationships, and information. You can have a similar sort of a problem in the strategic leadership mode. And again, when that connects to the work process, incoherence develops, and you're not talking about things that are important, like identity and relationship and information. All three of these leadership processes actually have weaknesses that which we must be mindful of or we get into trouble. The self-organizing leadership process has to connect to real work. If we spend all of our time talking about information, relationship, and identity, we can sit together and feel really, really good, and nothing will happen. And we often see that at conferences, for example. People talk, come up with really good ideas, and nothing happens. The operational one has a problem with it, and that is when we get stuck in it, we become a command and control organization, and things are incoherent. The strategic one has problems as well, because if we're not careful, we can wind up with kind of a cultish sort of an environment where you have some people who are insiders and know this stuff and others who are not, and you have insiders and outsiders, and that can create all sorts of dissension within the organization. Now, all three of these leadership processes can be seen here nestled within the Process Enneagram. Each of the processes touches a different point. Each of these brings different gifts together. But they're all interacting, and the leader needs to know and be situationally aware as to which one of these the leader ought to be working in. Another thing to look at is that the Process Enneagram is a bit like a layer cake. The self-organizing leadership process is the bottom layer of the cake, and the work process is the upper layer. Both processes are running all the time. The leadership process supports the work process. However, we have to be careful that we don't get caught up in the work and forget to do the leadership piece, because if we do that, then things begin to fall apart. The use of the Process Enneagram integrates and harmonizes these processes in a simple and easy-to-use way. The self-organizing process connects the points 0, 3, and 6, and then we go back to 9. That's the one I talked about. That's the central triangle. The work process follows the arrows, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, and back to 1. These are dynamical processes that are interacting, continuously forming a learning cycle, and building sustainability. Leaders need to have a good sense of the Process Enneagram. The people working out in the operations need to watch you doing it, and they learn it by that interaction of sharing information, building relationships, and helping people see how they fit in and find meaning. Here's the Process Enneagram diagram again. I often use colors to help remind me of the process and different processes I'm in as I use it. So I used blue for the self-organizing leader process, identity, relationship, and information. I used green for the strategic process, intention, principles and standards, and learning. And I used red for the issues and ambiguities, context and structure, and the work. It also helps me as I begin to create charts with groups to use the colors, because then things don't get mixed up and people can read the charts more easily. Here's a summary of the self-organizing leadership process. It's a very simple process. We share information. I would go out with people and talk with them about what was going on, listen, learn with them, have a cup of coffee with them, and we talk and share together. And in the course of doing this, I was being respectful and courteous, and they were learning to do that with me as well. At first, when I got to the plant, things were not friendly, but we became more and more courteous and respectful. And as we talked, people could begin to see how their work was so important for the success of the whole plant. We kept doing that. And kept doing that, and it is so important to be doing that. As I said, I did this for 3 to 5 hours a day for 7 years. I kept track of that. This is the inner triangle of the Process Enneagram. Here's the process of doing the work. like I talked about in baking the cake example. The process is co-created with the people and begins with a clear, compelling intention. For me, it was I wanted a piece of carrot cake. We develop and co-create our principles and standards of behavior. We talk together about how do we really need to work together in order to fulfill our intention. That's like the recipe. We identified the issues and ambiguities. These are the problems that were keeping us and holding us up. In the cake example, it was like checking to be sure I had all the ingredients and the equipment. We had to understand the context together. What is the outside world? What's going on? What are the competitive pressures? Who's doing what? What impact are the competitors having on us at our plant? And what do we need to do to adjust? And the structure is internally. How are we organized? Do we need to move more strongly to teams, for example, would come out of that, and thinking about that. And then actually doing the work was important, and I was with the people and watched them doing the work and learning from them and seeing how they were doing it. And we all talked about how to do it better, how we could be more safe, how we could look out for each other and help each other. We learned to tell the truth better. And we learned to apologize to each other when we screwed it up, which we did sometimes. And then we spent some time talking about what we've learned. It's like I was eating the cake that I baked to see if it was okay and if I needed to modify it. So that's the process of doing the work. That kept unfolding each time as we went forward. Let me talk a little bit about why the Process Enneagram works. What is it about this thing that makes it work and release the energy? Well, it's a natural process of self-organization and work that makes sense to people. That's the processes they spontaneously go to when the situation like the fire occurs and the dysfunctional management behaviors are ripped off. People are co-creating this. Whatever they want their future to be, they're co-creating it, so they're all having input into it. And when people do that, they don't resist the change. The Process Enneagram is disciplined, integrated process of dialogue and doing, running at the same time. It's easy to use, it feels right, and makes sense. When we do a Process Enneagram workshop and have the chart filled out, we post it on the walls as a reminder, and we talk about it as we go forward. As we do all this, meaning, trust, and action emerge, and these release enormous energy and creativity. This comes out of the way in which we decide to work together. This cannot be imposed. I cannot impose meeting on somebody. I can't make somebody trust me. And people won't do things unless they're pushed, unless they want to do it voluntarily, which then is a gift they give. This process engages the natural energy of nature. It's a bit like thinking of an expert canoeist reading the water and drawing energy from it and successfully negotiating swiftly flowing rapids. Rather than fighting the current, the canoeist engages the current and draws energy from it. So we can draw energy from these processes of self-organization and doing the work. And as we do this, it always leads us to new insights. Now I want to begin to talk about what leaders and managers do. I've used those phrases a lot, those words a lot, but I want to get some clarity on that so we all have a good sense of what really these people do. Managers and leaders are people. All of us could have one of those labels or both. Managership and leadership is what managers and leaders do. It's their activities. Now, for years and years and years, I never had good sense of the difference between these two. One of the best ones I heard was that managers work with things and leaders work with people. Well, that's fine to talk about, but when it came down to Where the rubber hits the road, it was not often very useful information. Which was I doing? Did it matter? So what? So recently I was able to develop a clearer picture of what I'm talking about when I use the word manager or managership and leader and leadership. In managership, the managers focus on the status quo and fixing things. They want to have stability. Things need to be running smoothly. The organization is seen as a machine. All the parts are together. We go from A, B, C, D and get good results. Their focus is on reliability, stability, predictability, and control. I want that when I'm riding in an airplane. These are needed for linear, step-by-step processes like running a payroll, shipping schedules, a production line, some HR procedures. These are the things that are needed to keep things running smoothly and producing the high-quality, high-volume products that we need to be making. Leaders, on the other hand, value people change in the future. They see organizations as living systems, complex, adapting, self-organizing networks of people. Their focus is on the open flow of information, building respect and trust, and developing a sense of belonging and meaning, and having a high level of participation. This requires courage, care, concern, and commitment. And I can tell you that walking the plant 3 to 5 hours a day for 7 years required all of these. I had to dedicate myself to doing this, even though there was other work going on. And some days I would run into conversations that were tough, and it took some courage to be out there and talk with the people about the hard times we were facing. But this is the key to excellence. This is what leaders have to do. Lower-level positions have more managership-type activities, whereas higher-level positions with more people responsibility require more leadership-type activities. But every job has some components of both. Most of the time when people are promoted, particularly in a traditional top-down organization, they're promoted because they're good managers, and they keep doing manager things as they get promoted. And this winds up causing lots of problems and a lot of dysfunctional behavior because people don't like to be treated like a machine, which is what managers tend to do. The leadership dynamically blends managership and leadership as appropriate. This is the dance that we have together to blend both of these together so we can get the best performance and have sustainability. So the leadership dance is blending these together. Management by walking around is a code name you may have heard. That came out of Hewlett-Packard when they first formed the company back in about 1960, and that was the management process they used. Change and purposeful conversations are held every day. This is not just the manager walking out there saying, "Hi, how are you, everybody?" and then walking on to somebody else and smiling, "How are you?" No, this is going out and sitting down with people and having a cup of coffee and beginning to talk about what's really happening and learning together to see how we all can get. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the history of the process of the Enneagram and where all this came from. The Enneagram figure was first introduced into the West by an Armenian, George Gurdjieff, in St. Petersburg, Russia, about 1915. Nobody knows where Gurdjieff got this. He never really talked about it himself or explained it to anyone. Researchers have found things that may be similar, but they're not really sure, so its origins are kind of a mystery. Gurdjieff had many groups of people talking about things, but he never wrote much down. So the first work about the Process Enneagram that was written down was done by P.D. Uspensky in his book In Search of the Miraculous, which he wrote in 1949. And he was talking about overcoming hazard in harmonious activities and achieving completeness. John Bennett, a British philosopher, picked up on this and expanded it. He was a student of Ouspensky and Gurdjieff, and he created systematics and developed the Enneagram more fully and wrote about it in 1966. The form, the hazard, and the purpose of the transformation were central parts of his writing. And one of Bennett's students, Anthony Blake, whom I know and is a mentor of mine, studied this more deeply, and he wrote a book called The Intelligent Enneagram in 1996, which goes into it quite deeply. And the work that I do was quite consistent with the path that these men created. So I'm on good ground here about using the process the way in which we're using it. But at this point, it was still pretty obscure to me. The work that Ouspensky and Bennett and Blake wrote about is not easy reading. It's hard work to get through all of that. One of the things I found was that the systematics that Bennett was talking about provided the language and the models for us to use when we're talking about chaos and complexity and complex adaptive systems. And when two different bodies of science merge together, I get quite excited about that. I named and developed the practical use of the Process Enneagram as a complexity tool. So it's a tool to use at the level of complexity, so it's the right tool at the right level. I identified the significance of the points and the lines, and I did some of this with Andrew Moyer, who was also an associate of Blake. Described the patterns for leadership and activities, revealed the pattern for sustainability. We could see the whole and the parts and the intersection of the parts. We talked about who, what, why, and how things are happening, and I did that with Carl Stent. We opened up 3 leadership and 2 transformational processes, and I did that with my partner and wife, Claire Knowles. And we revealed the 3-dimensional dynamical nature of the Process Enneagram. And we've introduced this to hundreds of people around the world in over 25 years. I've run hundreds of workshops. People get it. No one has ever walked out on me in a workshop in all that period of time. And I've written a bunch of papers and some books and whatnot. So here's some references there at the bottom of the slide so you can follow up if you want to. As I pointed out earlier, the leadership and doing work processes are intertwined and they unfold continuously. The activities on the right-hand side of the Enneagram create value. Those on the left side realize value. So as we work on the right-hand side, we develop the things that are important so that when we are out there trying to actually make things happen on the left-hand side, they really do happen correctly, and the processes are in harmony. The central process is the self-organizing leadership process. But as we think about the strategic leadership process, where we connect up points 1, 4, and 7, 1 and 4 are creating value. We develop high levels of participation and create an environment of safety, respect, and trust. We realize value at point 7 when we learn together and discover new potential that comes out of, however, of having created value on the right side. When we look at operational leadership or managership, connecting points 2, 8, and 5, point 2, we're creating value. We're identifying the problems. We're talking together and saying, okay, these are the problems, and have a shared understanding of what they are. And we realize value when we organize to get them fixed and actually do the work. So on the right-hand side, we're creating value. On the left-hand side, we're realizing value. And we're connecting leadership with real work and doing the work. This is a balancing process, and we have to be mindful of this. And again, this gets back to situational awareness. If we use too much managership, we're going to lose the people. If we use too much leadership, we're going to lose the business. If we just sit around and talk about things and feel good, nothing happens. We have to connect these together. And this is the partner-centered leadership that I talk about. Sharing information, building respect and being respectful, building trust, and discovering meaning together. These are the keys for this thing to work. We have to be in this dynamical balance all the time. It's not either or, it is both and. And this is really critical for us to look at. Here are some principles of partner-centered leadership. The organizations are complex, adapting, self-organizing networks of people. People want respect. They want to be listened to. They want to feel valued. People want to be talked with rather than talked at. People want to know what's going on and be included. Almost all information is shared. The only information we didn't share was personal materials like in HR discussions and whatnot. We opened up the environment where it was safe for everybody to talk to anyone that they wanted to talk with about what was going on and to ask questions or to show them something, whatever. They could talk to anybody. They could go anywhere. The stovepipes in the organization chart didn't block any of that conversation. And people want to contribute, and people want to co-create their future. And in the course of doing this, we provide order and focus for the business, as well as openness and freedom for the people to learn, to grow, and to make decisions close to their work. This is a dynamical thing, both and. I show it again in a little different way in this next chart. The horizontal lines are coming together. This is the initiating and opposing forces, and then the reconciling force is the vertical line that pops up in the middle of this chart. On the left-hand side of one of the horizontal lines is the organizational focus. This is all the managerial things, the business things, the machine thinking, numbers, safety systems, those kinds of things, the stuff that comes out of a lot of it from Frederick Taylor's work back in 1911. On the right-hand side is the people focus, and these are the leadership things of listening and respecting, seeing how the parts and the interaction of the parts take place. Lots of organizations, particularly top-down organizations, talk about how they value people. People are their most important resource. However, when the business gets in trouble, the business always wins. But if we bring them together and use the Process Enneagram and reconcile both of these so that they're both are interacting and working all the time, as we've shown, a third force comes in and we get this partnering and we get this release of enormous creativity and energy. And all the different dimensions of productivity get better and better and better. So we bring both sides of this together, the people and the business. We reconcile the forces with the principles and standards of behavior, and things get lots better, and they work much, much better. So we're back to this chart that you've seen before. We help people come together to solve complex problems. In the course of doing that, they build the social connections that they need to do the work. And energy and creativity and commitment are released to do the work very well. This is the right tool to be using in a complex system, and it's the bridge between the complexity theory and practical application. So in summary, what we've done today in Module 2 is to talk about building the natural organization. We've talked about leadership and managership. We talked about the history and the development of the Process Enneagram. And I tried to give you information about the leadership dance. That's the name of my book. That's how the leaders need to be able to be moving among the proper leadership approach and requiring situational awareness. Before we move on to Module 3, I'd like you to think about, In your own job, list 4 to 5 things that you do as a manager and 4 to 5 things you do as a leader. How does this feel to you? Do you see a difference? Are these things you do intertwined? In what way? Which role do you prefer? So think about your own work and what you are doing as you do this. And then explain how partner-centered leadership process of sharing information, building trust, and helping people see the importance of their work and find meaning supports the work process. So think about those two. We need to move this knowledge that I'm sharing with you from our heads to our stomachs so we begin to develop a better intuitive sense about what's going on and how we can engage in these dynamical processes. In Module 3, which is coming up, we'll take a deeper dive into the patterns and processes of the Process Enneagram. And here's the course schedule, which you've seen before. We're now through Module 2. So next week, we'll talk about simple rules and a deeper discussion of the Process Enneagram. In Module 4, I'll share some case studies. In Module 5, talk about transformation and waking up. And in Module 6, talk about creating the safe conditions and partner-centered leadership. Thank you very much. See you now in Module 3.